What's up, people behind the camera? Okay, so I've had the Armattan Rooster for a little while now. I think about 2 months or something like that. Kind of figured it was time to do an actual real-world review on the frames and kind of share my thoughts on what I think, how good they are, etc., etc., and just go over some stuff in the real world. Because whenever a new frame comes out, especially a big hype frame from a big name company, there's all these guys who immediately go and build it up and do a build and do a immediate review and stuff like that, which is cool. I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I wanted to sort of go over how these things are working for me day to day after having put a ton of packs through them. Positive. I want to give you something a little bit more something a little bit more colored by experience flying these frames, particularly compared to my experience flying the other frames I had previous to these guys. So as you can see, I've got 2 Roosters. They're identical builds right down to motors, flight controllers, ESCs, VTX, radio link, all that, and even down to the accessories I put on them. So I always, for freestyle stuff, I always tend to have 2 frames because I like that backup power. So if something goes wrong with one frame, it doesn't ruin my day, man. I can just pull out the other frame and off I go. So if something goes wrong with one frame, fair play. You can just pick up the other frame and keep flying and not completely screw up your day and waste your time, because you have to go and pack up and go home in shame and just fix your one quad. So I always run 2 for that reason. So why did I pick Roosters? It's a kind of a multitude of reasons that I've observed from having my other freestyle frames. I like the design and stuff, but the main draw for me was the way it's designed to carry a GoPro by default. In addition to that, it was the way that it manages the FPV count. So one complaint that I have about most other frames on the market is that they give you a nice frame and everything, and then you have to go and you have to strap some monstrous TPU thing to the top of the frame. So you're either you're zip tying the thing on there, or you're using zip ties, or sometimes you're screwing on the thing. And for me, that's never really been ideal. So I've had my previous frame I had, it had some really nice screw-on mounts, but then after a bunch of crashes, what would happen is the screw mounts would strip and the friggin' TPU thing would start flopping around. I went to zip ties. I've had other frames where you're strapping it on and you're zip tying it on. Fine, but the problem with those is, well, then your thing's always shifting around, you're zip tying stuff to the frame, and it gets really kludgy and annoying because you have this nice flying frame and then this ganky GoPro on it. So maybe your angle's different day to day, or it's not facing straight, or this. Plus, it's just the idea of why have a really nice frame and then sort of have this TPU mount on it like an afterthought. Now, I know a lot of people run frames like that, and I'm not dissing, obviously, all the other frames in the market. Whatever you fly and you're happy with, great. But what I liked with this guy is that it's designed with the GoPro in mind, and it's that idea that you're going to have a freestyle frame and you're going to be carrying a GoPro is sort of a really good assumption, I think, that has sort of informed the design of the rest of this frame. So it's literally, I love the way that it's designed around a session. I always fly with the GoPro on. I don't always post my footage up. It's a lot. I just always run with the GoPro to largely just see how I'm flying. Am I flying good? Am I shaky? Am I this? Am I that? If you always have a GoPro, this just made sense to me. Now, and the way these guys executed it is perfect. The angle's perfect. The mounting is super simple. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But the other thing I really liked is the way they treat the FPV cam. So obviously I've seen the cage on the Chameleon, so the whole idea of the metal cage is not totally new with this frame. yeah, the Chameleon had it. And when I saw it on the Chameleon, I thought at the time, like, oh man, that is just gonna be bad news. You're gonna crash, you're gonna bend it, it's gonna be complicated, it's gonna just weaken the frame, make it heavy, and so on and so forth. So I ignored it for a while, but then the Rooster came out, and they've obviously gotten a lot of feedback on the Chameleon and addressed it with this titanium frame. So that kind of intrigued me, just because of the material, but also the fact that I went online and I saw all these videos of them, you know, testing it, and I liked how they shared their thought process behind that. The benefit for me of having a cage like that is you can control the angle of your FPV cam, and it's super simple to do. You can just get in really easy, adjust some bolts, lock in whatever angle you want, and you're done. But also it remains super accessible, so I can get stuff in here to clean it, change wires and all that. Last but not least, right, is like if I want to take this FPV cam out, it's 2 screws and then the thing slides out the front. You know, that's amazing. So if I do for some reason hit something hard enough to knock a sensor loose or break a lens or something, I can literally pull out another camera, undo 2 screws, plug in the new camera, and I'm off to fly again. You know, with other frames you have to like take off the whole top plate, undo like 6 screws and undo some carbon plates, and it's just really complicated. I can literally change an FPV cam in this frame in I wouldn't say seconds, but a really short period of time, like a minute or 2 or something. It's a really nice feature to have. So I mean, it's protected really well, and like when stuff does go wrong, it's also super maintainable, and I really like that. It makes my life easier. Now I guess I'll circle back to the GoPro mount. So it's obviously always at the right angle, it's built into the frame. For me, I think it's 30 degrees, I'm not quite sure, but for me it's like perfect angle. But as I mentioned, I run 2 frames, and as you'll see, this guy's got no GoPro in it. Now suppose I'm running my 2 frames, I screw up the other frame. Now typically I have to go through a whole bunch of things to, like, you know, unzip tie the other mount from the other frame, and then blah blah blah, remount the GoPro just right, get the other frame running. It takes time and it's fiddly. With this guy, completely different story. So yeah, if something goes wrong with my frame and I want to swap my GoPro over, this will be a bit fiddly because I'm doing it one-handed, but I can literally slide the GoPro out of one of these things with 2 hands. I can slide it out. I'm gonna just do it, screw it, even one-handed, man, just to show how easy it is in comparison to other frames. So I'm squeezing the GoPro out of one frame. Bah, GoPro unmounted. And I'm gonna switch over to my new frame that's, you know, completely undamaged. So I can go here. Again, one-handed, so it's taking a little more time and it's a little more fiddly than it would otherwise be. But nonetheless, cha-ching, right? My GoPro is now switched to my new frame and I'm ready to fly, and the angle's all set, everything's perfect, and it was a piece of cake, and the GoPro's protected and everything, like ready to go. In practice, I super love that feature. Anyhow, when it comes to my build, I like things really basic and simple, and I've arrived on this particular configuration over a lot of time and a lot of trial and a lot of error with other frames. So I like to run a 4-in-1 ESC because if you look at these arms, they've got a lot of gunk and crap on them, and I would prefer, I just like keeping my ESCs away from that. So I just go in, I can wipe these down and they're fine. If a wire ever breaks, easy resolder. I like keeping the ESC inside the body of the quad where all the electronics are just more protected and stuff, because wires are a super easy fix, and it keeps the build a little bit cleaner as well. So the 4-in-1 I'm running is the Hobbywing 40 amp, because it's the best one I've ever come across. I've tried a few, won't name names, but it's the best one I've come across. Builds clean, super reliable, and the way I have mine mounted is I'm running the XT60 out the front of it, so that lets me have a really short XT60 wire, it's still got room for the capacitor inside. So the capacitor is hanging down and it's coming out between the cam and the rest of the stack, because there's plenty of room in this little middle section for that to happen. So it's got everything in there. It's capacitor, really short XT60. And that's one of the benefits I'm finding of this frame. This frame is designed so that you can do that, like run the XT60 out the middle. And I am finding that my batteries are taking a bit less of a beating in terms of battery wires hanging out and XT60s getting smashed and things like that. That's a problem I've had in the past, and this guy seems to help a lot with it. Now beyond that, I've just got my KISS V1 flight controller on there. No rocket science about the KISS, it's old school by this point. I run it because it flies amazing for me. I know how to set it up in 2 seconds, and I can tune the crap out of these things as well. So that's just my preference. Along with the 4-in-1, also I can plug it in and unplug it in 2 seconds, so I don't have to worry about dealing with a whole bunch of solder mess. And besides that, it's all TBS gear, so it's a TBS Unify Pro for the VTX, which is the only VTX I'll run, because for me it's just the most reliable in terms of its signal and in terms of how it plays well with others. So if I'm flying with other pilots and they're on Unifys, like, we generally have no problems at all. And from my experience, when you get guys with all these different brands of, you know, VTXs, just all this really weird shit happens and it's annoying, and I don't have time for that crap, man. I want stuff that works. For me, the Unify is the gold standard. It always goes in my frames. I'm running the TBS Unify in the back, and on top of that I'm running my TBS Crossfire. For me, the Crossfire is kind of a new thing, but I love it. It's rock solid. It does the job. I get awesome range on it. I've had no fail-safes, no problems. And so yeah, I'm in love. I'm converted. So overall, it's just a really slick frame design. Like the way it builds, it just builds super clean, and it's super maintainable, and it's just economical. I can't say it's a cramped build inside. You got just enough room to do what you need to do, you know. So I got my TBS gear right there in the back. I can get into that easily. One thing I do want to point out with in terms of how I deal with my TBS stuff is like the UFL. So I've seen all these guys online yakking about, oh, UFLs are crap, MMCX, blah, 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 blah. I think that's complete bullshit. All I've ever had to do with these guys is, like, I just tend to reverse mount my UFL connectors. So I go in, I mount the UFL, and then I tape around it and run the UFL at the back, so that when this thing comes under tension, for whatever reason, it's never pulling on the UFL connector. And then everything just tucks in really nice and tidy. And using that method for both the Crossfire and the Unify, I have never had a single friggin' problem ever. In terms of problems with the frame, maybe the elephant in the room is the bolt gate thing, right? So when the Rooster came out, there was all this hoo-ha about the bolts and those little, you know, inserts you put in the middle. And so for me personally, no problems whatsoever in terms of bolts. I have not broken a single friggin' bolt. I did switch to slightly different screws. So what I did is I ran different screws, and they're screwing into nuts in the top. But so at the time I did that just to mitigate any bolt gate disaster issues, but honestly, it's not a huge issue at all. Like, some of these bolts, even, they're not even really under a lot of tension anymore. The little things that come with the kit, the press-in nuts, are more than enough to keep that thing under tension. And these arms do not move for me whatsoever. They are rock solid. I can move them if I put a crap ton of force on it, but if you have good tools and you know how to torque down those bolts properly, even then these arms will not move. And I've never had a problem in terms of day-to-day flying, crashing, or anything with these arms ever moving around on me. The thing stays rock solid and super reliable. So I don't want to, you know, dismiss guys who've had problems with their bolts. Fair enough. All I can say is, for me, it was a non-issue. Complete non-issue. The only problem I've ever had with this frame is snapping off my video antennas. So, you know, sometimes when I crash, like, that guy would just break off, bang, gone. Or I've also smashed and off a couple of the actual connectors themselves. To be completely fair to Armattan though, like first of all, this thing is exquisitely designed. You want to change an antenna? No problem. Unscrew it, chuck on another one, you're done, you're good to go. You can do it in seconds. It's beautifully executed. And to be honest, I haven't ever seen another frame that has unbreakable antenna mounts, unless you're zip tying the crap out of your antennas, and then you can't swap them in 2 minutes like you can with this guy. I've run the stubbies on it. I've run a whole bunch of antennas on it. And even if you do snap this, it's not the end of the world, because you can go in and you can just swap your pigtail on your Unify and you're done. You're back in business. So overall, I mean, I can't even say that's a problem. In fact, to me, it's way better than having to get a frame where you're like, zip tying your antenna down to it with like 10,000 million zip ties and still gonna have it break. And then when you do have to swap antennas out, you have to undo a bazillion things at the field. It's a pain in the butt. With this thing, if anything does go wrong, 9 out of 10 times I can just swap another antenna on and I'm good to go. And the other 10% of the times, yeah, it's going to be a pigtail swap, and I'm just going to swap to my backup quad and fly that. None of that would matter if it was a crappy frame to fly or it didn't fly well. And well, actually it's neither of those. It's an amazing, it flies amazingly well. I'm used to like Truex frames, and I was flying the X-Ever Stinging, which is a Truex, before I got this thing. So when I first swapped over to this guy, like, he's a Swished X, I believe. So that the way it flew was a little bit different, took a little bit of getting used to. I found that the Truex configuration is a little more stable, but this guy, whoa, once I got it dialed in, this thing just flows like anything. It's super maneuverable. Just got it dialed in and it's awesome. Now I'll talk a little bit maybe about just the design of it, the way they executed the design. I'm talking attention to detail in terms of like how they designed it to go together, as well as quality. So in terms of attention to detail, like, I don't know if anyone's gonna see this, and I'm again really sorry if my GoPro's shaky and stuff. My hands are a little shaky today, but okay, the way this frame is executed is just incredible. Like, the way that these titanium parts mate with all the carbon parts is absolutely insane. Like, when you're building this frame, it's as if it just snaps together magically. Some tolerances on this guy are just amazing. Like, everything fits perfectly, everything lines up perfectly. You don't have to really faff around with anything. But just the way they've integrated the aluminum parts in the back, the metal part in the front with the carbon, that's no mean feat, and they've done it amazingly well. It goes together like a dream, and after you build it, you really do get this sense that, yeah, this is a premium product, and whoever designed it really knew what they were doing. So then there's the durability thing. So I have flown the living crap out of these guys, and not one single thing has broken on this frame or gone wrong with it. I've been flying for a while, and I've had other frames, and I've kind of learned from that. So when it came to building this frame, I decided I am going to reinforce it a bit. I'm not a big fan of like chucking on big TPU bits all over frames and stuff like that, but really, given that my intention is to kind of fly not only parts but a lot of bandos and metal and concrete and all that, I figured, why should I be crashing my carbons into stuff when I can have a little TPU protector here on the end of the arms? So I went to Brain 3D. I got the GoPro mount from them. I also got a little front bumper in TPU, which seems like a minor stupid thing, but it's not, because it just absorbs a little bit of impact in a high-speed frontal impact. I got the little TPU covers for the end of the arms so that my carbon doesn't delaminate when I keep hitting stuff, because that's something that's happened a lot on other frames for me. Like, especially ones that have really elaborate designs on the end. Over time, I just break that stuff off and it gets all destroyed, and it doesn't affect how the frame flies, but it's just annoying. It's like, why do people do all this fancy stuff when it's just going to break off? So the core design of this in carbon is great because it's just one big circular thing of carbon. It's going to protect the motor well. But then I figured, why not just protect the carbon from delamination as well, and just by adding a little TBU thing. So I did that, and it works fantastic, and it fits like a glove. Another thing I did, this might seem really stupid, right? But like, these little foam pads are actually, in my experience, the foam pads are actually more important than you think. Because, okay, the stock dog bone ones that come with the kit, I found they're a bit low, and the result is like, when you land, or particularly land on uneven areas, you're like landing on frame, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having those. So I went to thicker foam to give it a bit more cushion, and then I tend to tape around the foam too. Again, you might be thinking, well, why is this guy blabbing about that? That's the dumbest, stupidest thing ever. But no, like, in my opinion, it works, because when these things aren't reinforced on any frame, you know, you tend to land, they'll survive for a while, and these little foam guys, they tend to crack, or they snap, or they come off, or whatever, and having the tape around it just preserves them and makes them last a bit longer. So like, if you're coming in hot, now particularly if you're flying in concrete and stuff like that, it's nice to have, because it absorbs some shock, man. So just that little bit of dampening, hey, I'd rather come in and have that little bit of bounce or that little bit of give than just be whacking my electronics and my carbon and my screws every single time I'm landing. To me, that's silly. So adding a bit of foam, a little bit of tape to keep the foam intact, it helps out, in my opinion. Like, why not do it? The other thing that kind of lets you get away with some pretty stupid things. Sometimes you can be landing, you can bounce off some stuff or whatever. You can, if I'm going under like a bench or something, I can actually bounce the quad off the ground, no problem, and keep flying. So there's that aspect to it as well. I could like claim it's a performance enhancement or whatever, but honestly, it's just a nice little thing that I did that added to the frame in addition to the TPU. Not only am I getting better mounting for these guys, but it's also like way easier to maintain it. I can change cameras, I can move my GoPro around in just seconds and just keep flying, and it doesn't interrupt my day. It doesn't cause me a whole bunch of headaches. Now, I guess that kind of segues into the other thing I love about this frame. So another thing I really love about this frame is the fact that if I got to get inside this guy, it's 4 screws to get off the plate. So if something goes wrong, or I want to mess around with, you know, I want to rebind a receiver or change a channel on my VTX, it's 4 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that plate just pops off. And, you know, and when you do that, the rest of the frame is fine. It's in one piece. It's like still solid, still everything. With a lot of other frames, when you take off the top plate, like the whole frame, it sort of, you know, collapses and goes funny, and you might have some carbon fiber plates that just get snapped out of place, and it gets all fiddly and stuff. With this guy, if and when I need to get in that center stack, which I hardly ever do, by the way, but it's 4 screws, it makes it a real piece of cake to maintain this guy on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I've never really had to get in there while I'm out in the field, but if I did, piece of cake, man. And I'm not worried about, oh, I have to like undo 8 screws and faff around with a whole bunch of stuff. It's really freaking brilliant in my opinion. So it's kind of like a double whammy. I mean, you get better maintainability for the front, for your cameras and stuff. You get super easy access to your guts, and you know, I love that to bits. To sum it up in sort of a too long didn't read version, is they're great frames. They're great frames in terms of their durability. They fly great. The design is amazing. Like, it doesn't only look good, it's functional too. So it's like aesthetically great and all that, but the real win here is that it's super functional design. It gives you added value as a pilot, because you can get into it, you can maintain it easy, you can swap your cams around easy, and yet overall the thing is still better designed, it's more compact, it's super well executed, and it's just a dream to fly, a dream to operate, and a dream to own. So that's about all I got to say about the Armattan Rooster frame. I'm hoping my opinions are like objective enough that they're useful. to other people who are maybe in the market for a frame. And obviously I'm really happy with them. So like, great job, Armattan. I think you guys nailed it. And that's it. I also want to give out a shout to these guys on my hat, Pyroflip RC. Why is that? Well, in case it isn't obvious, or in case you don't know, I live in Dubai, which is like halfway around the friggin' world, and contrary to what everyone might think about Dubai, it's like a wasteland in terms of FPV. There's hardly anywhere you can fly, all these laws, and in terms of getting parts in Dubai, we need to order everything in. So the reason I love Pyroflip is because not only do they have all the best stuff to a point that's ridiculous and actually messes with my addictive personality. Like, there's always something new on Pyroflip that I want to buy. But the real killer thing about Pyroflip is, like, those guys ship international in like 4 days, and it's crazy. So like, I can literally, you know, if I have a problem or I need a part, I can literally order the part on, like, at the beginning of my work week, and, you know, this box will show up in my office right at the end of the work week, just in time for me to stick it on my quad and fly it that same weekend. That's an amazing backup to have. After support is amazing as well, as everybody knows by now. You know, they're super cool guys. They really get it. So thumbs up to them, and I am super happy to rock the Pyroflip hat because of that. I don't buy all my stuff from them, but anything that I want that they have, I order from them, like, without hesitation. And that's it. So guys, in summary, I'm really sorry if I talk too long or whatever, but I did really want to share my experience with the Rooster frames, because I know that, you know, they're not the cheapest frame out there. They're kind of expensive and premium. To share my thoughts on the Rooster frame with you guys so that you can make better purchasing decisions and have the best FPV experience you can possibly have. Simple as that. I'm out of here. See you later. Bye. that.